I hosted Christmas for my family, but they gave me a How to Be Less Boring book while praising my cousin. So I took the decorations down and left. Their angry calls were something else. Look, I gotta tell you this story because honestly, I'm still processing what went down at Christmas. Like, I'm sitting here with my morning coffee thinking about how wild this whole thing got, and I just need to get it off my chest, you know? So picture this. I'm 29, single, and apparently the designated family event coordinator because nobody else wants to step up. For weeks leading up to Christmas, I'm running around like a maniac. Target runs for decorations, Costco hauls for food, the whole 9 yards. I'm talking about dropping serious cash on this thing, probably close to $800 when you add up the groceries, decorations, and gifts for everyone. My place looked like Martha Stewart threw up all over it. No cap. I had garland everywhere, those fancy LED lights that sync to music, a tree that probably cost more than my car payment. I even bought one of those expensive honey-baked hams because my dad mentioned loving them once, like 3 years ago. The whole house smelled like cinnamon and pine, and honestly, I was feeling pretty good about myself. The guest list was the usual suspects: Mom, Dad, my Aunt Sarah, Uncle Mike, and my cousin Amy. Now Amy, she's always been the golden child of the family. 26, works in marketing for some startup in California, always posting these Instagram stories from rooftop bars and beach vacations. She drives a BMW her parents helped her buy and lives in this sick apartment overlooking the ocean. Meanwhile, I'm over here in Ohio working at an insurance company, driving my reliable Honda Civic, and apparently being the family's go-to person for hosting duties. Christmas Eve rolls around and everyone shows up fashionably late, as usual. Amy walks in wearing this designer coat that probably cost more than I make in a month, immediately starts taking selfies by my tree for her social media. Whatever, I'm used to it. I've got dinner ready, that expensive ham, homemade mac, and cheese, green bean casserole, the works. Everything's looking Pinterest perfect. Dinner starts off normal enough. Dad's complaining about his back, Mom's asking when I'm gonna give her grandkids, standard family dinner conversation. But then Amy starts talking about her life in San Diego, and suddenly it's like I became invisible. Everyone's hanging on her every word while she describes her new promotion, her fancy apartment, her weekend trips to Napa Valley. Update, so things are about to get real messy, and I'm wondering, have you ever felt completely invisible at your own party? Because that's exactly where this story is heading, and I'm curious if anyone else has dealt with family dynamics this toxic before continuing. Uncle Mike starts going on about how proud he is of Amy for making something of herself and living life to the fullest. Aunt Sarah chimes in about how Amy's such an inspiration and really knows how to enjoy life. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there having just spent my entire Christmas bonus making sure everyone has a perfect holiday, and it's like I don't even exist. But here's where it gets really good. Gift time comes around, and I'm actually excited because I put real thought into everyone's presents. Got Dad those expensive golf balls he's always talking about, bought Mom this beautiful jewelry box she'd been eyeing at the mall, got everyone something meaningful and personal. I'm watching them open everything, feeling pretty good about myself. Then it's my turn. Amy hands me this wrapped box with this weird smirk on her face. Everyone's watching like they're in on some inside joke. I open it up, and I kid you not, it's a book called How to Be Less Boring, A Guide to Living Your Best Life. The cover has this stock photo of some woman jumping on a beach with her arms spread wide. The room goes dead silent for like 2 seconds, and then everyone bursts out, laughing. Not like, oh, that's funny laughing, but that uncomfortable kind of laughter when someone's being roasted and everyone knows it's mean, but they're going along with it anyway. Amy's sitting there with this satisfied look on her face going, "We thought you could use some inspiration to spice up your life a little bit. Maybe try some new hobbies or travel more instead of just working all the time." Mom jumps in with, "Oh, honey, it's just a joke." Amy thought it would be funny, but she's laughing too, and so is everyone else. Dad's chuckling and shaking his head like I'm some kind of project that needs fixing. I'm holding this book, and it's like everything clicked into place all at once. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened. Growing up, Amy always got the expensive gifts while I got practical stuff like socks and school supplies. Family vacations were planned around her schedule, while mine didn't matter. Every achievement of mine got a polite nod, while hers got celebrated like she'd won the lottery. I realized I wasn't family to them. I was the utility player, the one who hosts the parties, pays for the food, does the heavy lifting, but never gets the recognition. I was the reliable Honda Civic of the family, while Amy was the flashy BMW everyone wanted to show off. The worst part was sitting there realizing that they all planned this together. This wasn't some spontaneous joke. They'd discussed this, probably laughed about it while shopping for it, maybe even texted each other about how hilarious it would be to give me a book about being less boring. I set the book down on the coffee table real calm-like and said, "You know what? You're absolutely right. I have been pretty boring lately." Everyone's still chuckling, thinking I'm playing along with their little joke. I've been boring enough to spend weeks planning this dinner, boring enough to drop $800 on food and decorations, boring enough to make sure everyone has a perfect Christmas. The laughter started dying down as they realized my tone wasn't matching what they expected. Update. Okay, so I'm about to tell you what I did next, and honestly, it felt so good in the moment, but also terrifying. Have you ever reached that point where you just can't pretend anymore? Because I was about to do something that would change everything with my family forever. I stood up and walked over to my beautiful Christmas tree, started unplugging the lights, taking off ornaments, the whole thing. Everyone's just staring at me like I've lost my mind. "What are you doing?" Mom asks, and there's this edge to her voice like she's starting to panic. Well, since I'm so boring, I figured you probably don't want to enjoy the fruits of my boring labor. I'm calmly taking down garland, packing up decorations, acting like this is the most normal thing in the world. Amy's sitting there with her mouth open going, "Are you seriously having a meltdown over a joke?" Nope, not a meltdown at all. Just realizing that you're right, I am boring. Boring enough to think family actually cared about the effort I put in. Boring enough to believe that maybe, just maybe, I deserve the same respect I give everyone else. I disappeared into the kitchen and started packing up all the leftover food. The expensive ham, the desserts, everything. If they thought I was so boring, they could figure out their own dinner situation. Dad finally gets up and follows me into the kitchen. "Come on, don't be so sensitive, it was just a harmless joke." Harmless to who exactly? You know what would have been harmless? Maybe saying thank you for hosting. Maybe acknowledging that I spent weeks and hundreds of dollars making sure everyone had a nice Christmas. Maybe not making me the punchline at my own party. I could hear them all talking in the living room, probably trying to figure out how to handle their dramatic host. But honestly, I was done caring what they thought. I packed up the good silverware, wrapped up the leftover pie, even took back the expensive bottle of wine I'd bought for dinner. If I was so boring, they didn't need to be burdened with my boring hospitality. The whole time I'm doing this, Amy's following me around going, "This is so ridiculous. We were just trying to help you have more fun in life. You're taking this way too personally." You know what would help me have more fun? Not spending my Christmas being insulted by people I spent my savings entertaining. Not being treated like the family ATM who exists to make everyone else's life easier. I wrote out a quick note on a piece of paper. "Thanks for the joke. Don't expect any more boring holiday hosting from me. Enjoy figuring out Easter on your own." Left it right there on the dining room table next to that stupid book, grabbed my coat, my purse, and my overnight bag I'd packed just in case I decided to stay at my friend Jessica's place. Sometimes you just know when you need an exit strategy, you know? "Where are you going?" Mom's voice is getting that panicky tone, like she's finally realizing this isn't just me being dramatic, somewhere less boring apparently. And I walked right out of my own house, leaving them sitting there with all their judgment and zero food or decorations. I drove straight to Jessica's place, and let me tell you, that girl opened a bottle of wine and let me vent for hours. She'd been telling me for years that my family treated me like garbage, but I'd always made excuses for them. Sitting there on her couch, finally saying it all out loud, I realized how right she'd been. Turned my phone off for the rest of the night because I could already imagine the flood of messages coming my way. Sometimes you need radio silence to think clearly, and I definitely needed to process what had just happened. I slept better that night than I had in weeks, which probably says everything about how much stress I'd been carrying from trying to make everyone else happy. The next morning, I finally turned my phone back on, and holy cow, 37 missed calls, 60-something text messages, and a few voicemails that started apologetic but got progressively more demanding. Mom's first text, "Honey, please come back. We can talk about this like adults." By message number 15, "This is completely out of line. You ruined Christmas for everyone." Amy's messages were something else entirely. Started with fake concern about my mental health and ended with her calling me selfish and dramatic. Uncle Mike sent me this long paragraph about family loyalty and not abandoning people over misunderstandings. The voicemails were even better. Dad demanding I bring back the food because they had nothing for breakfast. Mom crying about how I'd embarrass the family and what would the neighbors think seeing me pack up and leave. Amy actually had the nerve to ask when I was coming back to clean up the mess I'd made. Update. The aftermath of walking out has been absolutely wild, and I'm still getting messages weeks later. But here's my question before I tell you how this all ends. At what point do you stop letting family treat you badly just because they're family? Because what happened next really made me question everything I thought I knew about unconditional love. I spent that whole week at Jessica's place, and honestly, it was like a fog lifting. I wasn't constantly worried about who needed what, wasn't planning the next family event, wasn't calculating how much money I'd need to set aside for everyone else's good time. For the first time in years, I was just existing for myself. But the messages kept coming. They tried every angle: guilt, anger, fake concern, you name it. Mom sent me this long email about how family forgives each other and how I was being too proud to accept their apology. Problem was, nobody had actually apologized for the gift or for treating me like a joke. They were sorry I was upset, not sorry for what they did. Amy escalated things by posting on social media about family drama and some people not being able to take a joke. Didn't mention my name, but anyone who knew us would figure it out. Real classy move, you know? 2 weeks went by and suddenly the tone changed. New Year's was coming up and apparently nobody wanted to step up to host. Mom called asking if I'd gotten over my tantrum, yet because they needed to plan something. Not asking if I was okay, not addressing what happened, just wanting to know if their free party planner was back in business. That's when I knew I'd made the right choice. I sent one group text to all of them. I've decided to step back from organizing family events. You're all adults who can plan your own gatherings. I'll attend if invited and treated with respect, but I'm done being the default host and bank account. The response was immediate and predictable. How could I be so selfish? What about family traditions? Why was I letting one little joke ruin everything? But here's what they didn't get. It wasn't about one joke. It was about years of being taken for granted, years of being the responsible one who made everything possible while getting none of the appreciation. That book was just the final straw that broke my back. 3 months later, I heard through Jessica that they'd tried to organize Easter at Amy's apartment. Apparently, it was a disaster. Amy ordered pizza and expected everyone to be grateful. Uncle Mike complained about having to bring his own drinks. The whole thing fell apart when everyone realized that maintaining family traditions actually requires work that someone has to do. Meanwhile, I was taking salsa dancing classes and had booked a solo trip to Nashville. Turned out that when you're not spending all your money and energy on other people's good times, you have resources for your own happiness. Who would have thought? Amy reached out once more around my birthday, probably because she realized the family ATM had dried up and they needed someone to start footing bills again. She sent this half-hearted apology about maybe going too far with the joke and suggested we put this behind us for the sake of family. I responded with, I appreciate you reaching out, but I'm not interested in going back to the way things were. If you want a relationship with me, it needs to be built on mutual respect, not just when you need something. Never heard back from her after that. Mom still calls occasionally, usually when there's some family event they're struggling to pull together. The conversations are awkward because she wants to pretend nothing happened while also hinting that I should step back into my old role. I keep it polite but distant. Dad sent me a birthday card with $50 in it, probably feeling guilty. It was the first time he'd remembered my birthday in years without me reminding him. The really interesting thing is how much my perspective changed once I stopped trying to earn their approval. I realized I'd been so focused on being the good family member that I'd never asked myself if they were being good family members to me. I started hanging out more with Jessica's family for holidays. Her mom actually thanks people for bringing food and asks about your life without comparing you to someone else. Revolutionary concept, right? My coworkers started inviting me to their family gatherings too, once I stopped always being busy with my own family drama. Turns out there are people out there who appreciate effort and don't take kindness for granted. 6 months after Christmas, I got a text from a cousin on my dad's side who I barely knew. Apparently word had gotten around about what happened, and she wanted me to know that she'd had similar experiences with the family dynamics. We ended up meeting for coffee, and it was like talking to someone who'd lived in the same house, but a different reality. She told me stories about family events where Amy got celebrated for showing up while other people got criticized for not doing enough. About how certain family members always seemed to get passes while others were held to impossible standards. It wasn't just me. There was a whole pattern I'd been too close to see. That conversation was like the final piece of the puzzle clicking into place. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't too sensitive, and I definitely wasn't wrong for walking away from people who treated me badly. These days, I host dinner parties for friends who actually appreciate the effort. I travel when I want to without worrying about family obligations. I've got money in my savings account because I'm not constantly funding other people's good times. Last month, I heard that Amy moved back home to Ohio because her startup went under. Apparently, the glamorous California lifestyle wasn't as sustainable as she'd made it seem on Instagram. The family's been pretty quiet about their golden child needing to move back in with her parents. I won't lie. There was a tiny part of me that felt vindicated hearing that news. But mostly I just felt sorry for everyone involved because they're all still stuck in the same toxic patterns while I've moved on to something healthier. Sometimes people ask if I miss the family closeness, and honestly, you can't miss something that was never really there. What I thought was closeness was actually just me working overtime to maintain relationships with people who didn't value what I brought to the table. The best part of this whole story is that I kept that stupid book. It's sitting on my bookshelf now, and every time I see it, I remember the moment I decided to stop being boring. Boring enough to accept disrespect. Boring enough to prioritize other people's comfort over my own dignity. Boring enough to believe that family means tolerating bad treatment. Turns out the most exciting thing I ever did was walk away from people who couldn't see my worth. And that's a plot twist I never saw coming, but I'm grateful for every single day. These days when people ask about my family, I just say we're not close anymore. Most people understand that families are complicated, and the ones who push for details usually aren't worth explaining it to anyway. I'm planning a trip to Europe this fall with money I would have spent on Christmas last year. Jessica's coming with me, and we're going to eat our way through Italy and not apologize to anyone for enjoying ourselves. Sometimes the best gift you can give yourself is the permission to stop trying to fix relationships that were broken long before you realized it. And sometimes walking away from people who don't appreciate you is the most loving thing you can do for yourself. That Christmas was the last one I spent feeling small and unappreciated. Every holiday since then has been exactly as boring or exciting as I want it to be, surrounded by people who actually enjoy my company. And that book about being less boring? Turns out I didn't need it after all. I just needed to stop boring myself by staying in situations where I wasn't valued.